All right, so I'm already starting a little late. I want to apologize because I can never follow anybody that's that good of a speaker. It's not going to be nearly as entertaining. I have to warn you up front. So first time I'm giving this talk, and it's called Cyber, using the kill chain to actually accomplish something. By a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the cyber or intrusion kill chain by Lockheed Martin? Hi, Dave. All right. How many of you know what all 7 steps are? Yeah, right. How many of you actually use it in your day-to-day job, where you apply it at some point? Not very many of you. So a lot of our customers, so some of the stuff I do is a lot of defense work with Splunk and our customers. A lot of our customers want to use that cyber kill chain to create monitoring and alerts around those 7 steps. And I was tired of just guessing. There's like the MITRE, John was talking earlier about the MITRE framework, which is great to kind of break things up into. And there's other people that break threats down into different categories, but I hadn't seen any yet that break it down into all 7 kill chain steps. So my idea was I would break down not only what happens for those threats at all 7 steps, but also what defensive mitigations you can provide at all 7 steps, and what alerting and monitoring that you can do as well at all 7. And you know, depending on the threat, there's going to be multiple at different steps. Sometimes there's none at all that you can actually prevent, and we'll go over some of that right now. See if I can figure this out. This is actually the part of the slide deck that I'm the most happy about, because I'm really, really bad with anything design related, and you'll see why. It actually looks fairly decent. So the intrusion kill chain is broken up into 7 steps. First step is recon. It's when they do OSINT, right? They're going out there grabbing email addresses from dumps. They're trying to find relationships based on, you know, who's the CEO or who works in marketing, who actually has access to wire transfers. The attacker's going out and trying to find what technologies you use. So if you're on your LinkedIn profile and you say, you know, you've implemented F5 and Barracuda filtering, or, you know, you have this DDoS protection or this antivirus, you're listing all of those specific technologies on your LinkedIn profile. They're also using those to build a full file based on, you know, your company or you specifically, so they can be more targeted attacks. Number 2 is weaponization. See, I made that work. It was all one image. Now it's broken up into 7. So it's the automation of some type of tool. They do, you know, remote access, Trojans, anything like that. That's the tool that they're building in their basement or wherever, that you don't have any view into yet. You know, they're doing that all on their own, just like with the OSINT. You can't really see them doing the OSINT for the most part. So step 2 also is something that's completely out of your hands. Number 3 is delivery. So that's the transmission of the weapon, sending it over email, phishing, that kind of stuff. Drive-by downloads, USB. There's exploitation, which is step 4. That's when the payload's delivered and they're actually exploiting the box. Their code triggers, and, you know, they're actively running something on the inside of your network or outside on something that you control. Installation allows them to maintain persistence in your environment for all that stuff they're going to do later on. Command and control. It's when that thing that they installed is going to talk back to them. It's going to beacon out. It's going to be so they don't have to individually attack one device. It's going to be, you know, centralized management for the bad guys. And then last step is action and objectives, and that's the end. That's their end goal. They're either stealing your information, selling your information, so data exfiltration. They're trying to get rid of it. They're going to wipe your boxes. They're going to do whatever they can as whatever their end goal was. Maybe they've set up like a jump box for a botnet, or to access other boxes in your network, whatever. Number 7's end goal. So that being said, those are the 7 steps. What I wanted to do was break them up into common threats, right? So what are, you guys can shout, I like an active participation. What are some of the most common threats that you worry about if you're a defender day to day? Ransomware. How does the kill chain affect ransomware? That's what this whole talk's about. We're going to do ransomware. So, ransomware, data exfiltration, DDoS, web app attacks, all that kind of stuff that defenders are worried about day to day. I wanted to break up into those 7 steps of the kill chain, make it a little bit easier to give you actionable steps to take, right? You're not just saying, okay, I know I need a firewall, I know I need endpoint protection, I know I need this and this and this. You can actually break it down to, okay, we know we're worried about ransomware. Ransomware is, over the last 4 years, has gone from, I think it was like the 88th or 89th most popular threat to number 4 over the last 3-4 years. So it's everywhere. You know, there's several books out now about how to combat ransomware and about ransomware itself, and people are seeing it all over the place. And not just with that kind of stuff. I know people kind of razz on the Verizon DBIR, but they do have a lot of good overall information. They're basically telling us everything we already know. But they broke it down into 9 different things that we should be worried about, or that people are continuing to be worried about. One of those was ransomware, or other crimeware, right? Cyber espionage is on there, denial of service, which is mostly large enterprises. They said 90% is towards large enterprises. Things like payment card skimmers, point of sale intrusions, and everything else. Errors, kind of like the one that took down Amazon. So we're going to break it down into malicious action, defensive mitigation, and monitoring alerting. And not only should we worry about defending against each action, we'll also cover a little bit of IR and testing and proof of concept as well. So yay, ransomware, what everybody's usually worried about. It gets brought up all the time at work. It's really hard if you don't already have a handle on your defensive infrastructure to prevent ransomware. It's very prevalent in companies that don't really have a security program and are kind of just winging it. I've talked to people that have, a dozen, 2 dozen incidents a year, which to me is insane. I know it depends on the amount of endpoints you have, but really, that's a lot of ransomware to deal with, especially if you don't have backups, if you don't have any idea what was on that box at any point in time. Maybe it actually contains sensitive information. And a lot of those times they don't have a plan. So, reconnaissance. So before, a lot of people think that the first 2 steps, reconnaissance and weaponization, there's not really anything you can do as a defender. I think there is. Usually in those first 2 steps, for a lot of the attacks, it's the same kind of stuff. Most of the time it's phishing, right? Phishing always works. They're always going to use it as an attack vector, but there's a lot of things that you can do to not only prevent it, but kind of alert on it as well, kind of give you, a step up. You want to use each step as kind of like a funnel, right? So other than, the rare case where you have a zero trust network like BeyondCorp, most everybody's still in the network model where you have a VPN, you have a firewall, you're you're supposed to have all of the stuff with segmentation and all that. You're going to want to work from the outside in, right? Because that's where you're going to be attacked at the most, and you want to funnel that down so you worry about less as you get closer to the inside of your network. So the malicious action in this case is the attacker obtains your email addresses, technologies used, like we talked about before, all with OSINT, and they can build custom phishing campaigns. You know, they know Alice in accounting works with this technology, and, you know, maybe she's put on social media that she works in the same office with this other person who may be out on vacation or something. All that information can be used in that specific targeted phishing attack. Helps them get a little bit further each time, and there's stuff you can do to prevent that kind of stuff. So it's not, I don't really, I guess, consider this defensive mitigation. It's more like a proactive measure to do some of this stuff, but policies and procedures suck so bad. Teaching users that it's not okay to list specific technologies. Having your email address out there is going to happen, obviously. But creating policies and procedures around that kind of gives you a little bit of more say. You know, when somebody's out blasting, you know, on Twitter about what they're doing day to day or taking screenshots of their desktop or whatever, it gives you something to fall back on if something like this would happen. And then for monitoring alerting, I like this idea. Look at the database dumps that are out there. I know somebody that has their own elk stack with all of the past like 4 or 5 years of database dumps that you can look up, like stardelta.com, and it'll say, oh, 500 delta.com employees either had their Box account leaked or Dropbox, Ashley Madison, LinkedIn, you name it. All of the database dumps that have they're using their corporate email addresses for this stuff. You know they're probably using their corporate passwords for it as well. If you can find that information out there, that's very useful for you. You can make sure those users have a little bit more training, that their passwords might change a little bit more often. Make sure they're not using the ones that they were using to cheat on their spouse. But that's kind of a proactive measure that you can take in that case for step 1. Another thing you can do is, say you run your corporate website, put out there like a honey account. So in the same background font as whatever your website is, you know, say it's all black background font, all black background with white font. In black, put a account that you're going to monitor that email address for. That's the only place that you put it. And if an attacker is scraping the website and LinkedIn, which you can do in like 5 seconds with like the Harvester or Set or whatever, it will go out and scrape all these websites looking for these email addresses. When you get email addresses, emails to that address, you know they will have had to scrape that site to get that email address and send you stuff, right? So that's information that you can use as well. So now we're on to delivery. Malicious action, like I said, for the most part, it's always phishing. It's going to be targeted based on the OSINT they use. It could just be a mass email as well. Those are pretty common. There's a lot of defensive steps that you can take for step 2. The first one is block attachment types that are definitely malicious that you probably don't need. Not only block them at whatever email gateway is, but you can also in group policy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, kind of disable that kind of stuff. So like JS, JSE, WSF, HTA, VB scripts, all that kind of stuff. There's a list of like a dozen or so file types that you can just completely block at the perimeter. Okay, every now and then maybe somebody's trying to send you a legitimate JavaScript file. Probably going to be rare, right? For the most part, those are going to be exploits trying to get in with phishing attempt. In those rare cases, have them zip it and password protect it. That way they know what exactly they're getting, they know who it's coming from, that kind of stuff. Number 2, you can scan on Office documents for macros. Use blacklists or gray lists like Spamhaus, DNS SPL. A lot of people don't take advantage of the free blacklists and gray lists that are out there if they handle their own mail filtering. Or just move to Google Mail because they seem to handle all that stuff really well. Proper user education. So if they get that JavaScript file, are they going to report it? A lot of people, also think that user education is worthless. But honestly, if it's done right, after you've already put out all of your fires and patched your boxes and you can't RDP in from the internet, user education is going to be where they go to next. Because if an attacker can go straight into your network, why even bother with a user who might report you? They're just going to go straight in. But eventually you do want to have, customized user education for your environment. And that's the kind of stuff that you want to, instill in them is trust but verify. If it's an attachment, they should know that they're expecting an attachment. I'm sure stuff you've all heard before, teaching them just to report on stuff is what I always try and talk about, right? Because they're, 100 different pairs of eyes, 100,000 different pairs of eyes, depending on the organization size, that can work just as well as any IDS for stuff that the IDS isn't going to find. If that email gets through and doesn't get flagged on any rule, and it seems weird to them, they should have an easy avenue to report that to. If they don't feel comfortable talking to you or your help desk, they might delete it, sure, or they might click on it just if they're curious. But if they're aware of that's something that's happening, you want them to feel comfortable reporting it to you. Implement ad blocking on all browsers, install extensions across the org. That's always helpful for drive-by downloads and stuff. And for monitoring and alerting on that, flag screensaver files and JavaScript files over 22 and 15 meg. You should never have those anyways. If you're blocking them, then you don't really have to worry about it. But you can still flag them in Outlook or group policy or whatever to kind of, or endpoint solution, whatever you're using, to alert you if they end up on a box somehow, because they should never be above that, unless you're a developer creating screensavers for a living. And then we move on to exploitation, which is step 3. Everybody's favorite software. This malicious action is when they download a JavaScript file or a Word with a macro enabled with some exploit code in it. That's usually what happens in ransomware cases, right? And for defensive mitigation, not all of this is showing, and it's probably hard to read anyways, but this is group policy for all of you that aren't window admins. You can disable all of those file types that I mentioned in group policy. Have them open with Word or Notepad or whatever. They're not going to actually execute a JavaScript file if it's an end user. PowerShell files, whatever. Have it so the default program is Notepad. It's more than likely only going to hurt a couple people. And great thing about group policy is you can restrict it so, hey, admins over here or programs over here can still run that shit on wherever they want, and everybody else is going to be, kept from doing it. Endpoint protection. A lot of people also scoff at antivirus. Not only do some regulations and standards require you to have antivirus, it's still going to stop a baseline of just crap that's out there on the internet, right? They have signatures for a reason. They're still doing active stuff. If somebody wants to get in, they're going to get in and bypass antivirus. But for the most part, the automated stuff, it's going to stop. And other endpoint things like Carbon Black, what have you. And then for monitoring alerting, you can monitor proxy logs for unexpected file retrievals. This is kind of after the fact. I don't know that they have anything inline, but I think this is part of Floss, which will deobfuscate common strings from ransomware, and you can also block an alert on those. Just depends on if you do your own malware reversal, that kind of stuff. You can, have a list of ones that are already known for common ransomware that's out there. And on to step 4, which is installation. The malicious action is the payload's executed on the end user's device. Keep in mind things like, Lucky, Cerber, CryptoWall, and a couple others all use the built-in Windows Crypto API. So that's something that you can keep an eye on that we'll talk about in a second. That's what's actually encrypting the files. Of course, if you're worried about ransomware, you have to back up, right? That's the one major defensive mitigation that you can possibly do for ransomware, is make sure you have not only that you're sure that you're backing up, but you're sure that you're able to restore from those backups. I've been in several places where, yeah, sure, we back up everything, and then they have ransomware, and it's either corrupt or not accessible or whatever, but testing your backups is definitely very important. You can use file system firewalls. Little Flocker is one that I recommend. That's a pretty good Windows firewall. You can block things on per process basis. There's some experimental endpoint stuff that can actually block ransomware. I've never actually played with it myself. I have a note down here that Decryptonite is an example of it. And then number 4, have a portion of your IR procedure set aside to what you actually do if ransomware happens. I guess it's not, I don't know that it's really considered a mitigation or not, but if you have a piece of ransomware come in and you don't have a backup, but you know that there's maybe somebody's actively on your network along with that ransomware, you want to know how far you should go in that case every time. Maybe you categorize your machines. You could say across the board, all endpoints, sorry, you should have saved your shit up on the cloud. You should have saved it on a file server. If you had something on your desktop, sorry, you're out of luck. That stuff should be not only built into your IR program, it should be also in other policies and procedures that are written. Let's see here. Oh, and if you don't have a full IR staff, some people only have 1 or 2 people handling their entire security program. You have other stuff to do, right? You can't be sitting there reversing malware trying to figure out where it came from so you can stop it next time. Maybe you have enough money that you can call in a professional and they can do your IR. Maybe you ship out your IR to a third party. You don't want to wait until 5 o'clock on a Friday when you get ransomware and you're like, I'm going home for the day. You can call so-and-so, and you don't have any kind of relationship with them. You're now paying, $1,000 an hour or whatever their rate is because they've never heard of you. You don't have a contract in place. That's the kind of relationship that you kind of want to get beforehand, before any of this happens. Then you don't have to worry about, spending way more money than you need to for an emergency case situation. And here's monitoring and alerting for this step. Like I said, a lot of them use the Windows Crypto API. You can monitor for spikes in encryption. Like it shouldn't be, encrypting 1 million files a minute on a normal user system. you can alert on that kind of stuff. And another thing that kind of doesn't really have to do with the defensive that I talked about before, but that you can also monitor on, are outgoing domains. So you're going to want to, collect DNS, advanced DNS logging that have an inordinate amount of numbers. Most domains don't have, a random number string in them. That's usually a sure sign of malware, some kind of ransomware beaconing out to like an NX domain or something. And step number 6 is command and control. And right here, the malicious action is it's contacting a CNC server to do the key exchange and for the decryption key to be sent to them. And defensive mitigation for this is DNS sinkholes and auto block outbound crap. Right? There's a lot of different sites that will allow you to. Most of them, I don't know. I think half of them are probably paid. But there's, I know SANS has a list of stuff that you can use for DNS sinkhole and just outright blocking. This is where you can use, actually use threat intel, right? Block all that shit at the firewall. You don't want to alert on it. Yeah, this is, I think I took this from SANS. Whole list of known CNC servers that they have. That's constant. This might not be SANS. Malwaredomains.com, maybe? I don't know. I made these like 2 days ago. So, yeah, you can use all of those lists to pull in and just DNS sinkhole them. They go directly to a different DNS server and they're not going outbound. You can also block. Not everybody has to get to the internet. You shouldn't be browsing to the internet from servers. That kind of stuff shouldn't be allowed through your proxy. There's only a certain amount of people and amount of devices in the infrastructure that should be allowed outbound. And number 7 is actions and objectives. So this is the last one. And here's the malicious action for this one. They're pretty much done. They started to delete your volume shadow copies if you have those turned on in a Windows environment. Try to delete any other backups that might be connected. And they start encrypting all of the stuff on your hard disk. This is one of my favorite things to recommend is implement honey directories. So by this point it sucks. It already started to encrypt stuff. Your goal at this point is to stop it from going any further, anybody else clicking on it. Need to focus on whatever the first device was and take your IR from there, whatever your IR procedures are. But a honey directory is, say, for example, you create a $/$ There's I think it's a PowerShell script that will do recursive $$ directories until the Windows maximum file name length. And that ransomware is going to continually just try and go through each one of those over and over and over and over again, and you can alert on that. It's already started to, effectively ransomware the system and encrypt stuff, but you might be able to get on top of it depending on how much data is on the computer. A lot of times ransomware will go either by file size or by name alphabetically, but most of the time it will hit the $signs first. It's the reason why things like your recycle bin gets encrypted before anything else, because it's $sign recycle bin. And for monitoring and alerting, can you tell where all of the files started to get encrypted? So this is a Splunk graph that's actually looking over the advanced file auditing logs. And you're not gonna, the normal user, every now and then they'll like install a program and there'll be a little blip, right? But you're not gonna see mass file changes over the system continuously unless something like this is happening, or even if it is the random anomaly, it's probably something you want to check out anyways. Also, testing and proof of concept. It's something that I struggle with sometimes just because it's hard to sit people down and run through a lot of this. Nobody wants to put ransomware on their network, right? There's other ways that you can mimic it unless you have a full test environment, which I'd love to find people or customers that actually have full test environments that you could do this kind of stuff in. But not everybody's just going to want to stick ransomware on their network so they can test out all of these defenses. But if you have them all broken up into the different levels and you know what it's supposed to look like, you can write a Python script to, modify 1 million files at a time, create, write, read, whatever, modify, and you're going to see the same kind of stuff. You just want to make sure your alerting's working, and the defensive mitigations that you put into place are actually, make sure that IDS rule actually works how you think it does. Don't just blindly put it in place and hope that it's going to work when you actually do get ransomware. And I don't expect you to read this. I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of what I plan on all of these to look at the end. Ransomware is the one I have done the most of on so far. Next up, I'm going to do data exfiltration, privilege misuse, insider threats, whole bunch of other ones, just to kind of put them out there to give people ideas or at least a framework to go on. This one I'll put out there now, but the rest of them won't be until October because that's when I actually have to have training on it. And that's probably when I'll finish it. And that's me and all my stuff. So a little bit shorter than I wanted it to be, but yay. Does anybody have any questions or comments or point out that I'm wrong anywhere?
You're wrong!
Go home.
So will you be posting these on your blog then?
Yeah, yep. I'll go ahead and put these up on my blog, and then as I add more to them, I'll go ahead and stick them out there. They're just in a Google Doc right now, so yep. And if you have any ideas of stuff that I can work on as well, no matter what level it goes at, I can just stick it in the spreadsheet or, I'm trying to be almost tool agnostic where I'm not, specifying any specific tools unless that's the only thing that out there that does it, but that's the whole idea. That's it. Thanks, guys.